Against Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson. ESPN is reporting Watson has settled with all but 4 of the women who have filed lawsuits against him. Those suits allege that Watson engaged in sexual misconduct while still in Houston. ESPN has a statement from Tony Busby, the attorney representing those women, and Busby says paperwork is still being completed, then the cases will be dismissed. A grand jury declined to file criminal charges against Watson in the cases, but he still faced the civil suits and could be penalized by the NFL. We'll keep you posted.
Meanwhile, it is no surprise that Browns fans have a lot to say about today's news. Lydia Esparra has a reaction tonight from a loyal group of female fans.
For Browns fans, they are some of the best football fans in the entire country.
I'm tired of hearing about Deshaun Watson.
So Robin Lochner is ready to move on from the Deshaun Watson saga. She is the founder of the Cleveland Browns Women's Group. It's on Facebook, and she has 6,000 followers. I spoke to some of them today.
How does it affect you when it comes to women's rights?
It feels like a slap in the face to women.
I honestly think that Deshaun does have a problem, and I would love to see him get help for that problem.
I myself am a survivor of molestation, rape, and some other horrific things. There are 3 sides to this story. There's his side, her side, and the truth.
And Deshaun isn't admitting to any truth because he's settling. This is just a process to end legal battles.
I, for one, am happy this is over. I want to talk about Deshaun in a football spotlight. I think he's going to be great.
Like, it is a team sport. You don't have to absolutely root for just one player. So
Do what you need to do to take care of your legal business and play ball.
And they're pretty adamant about it. And while the women are willing to forgive, they are not willing to forget. They would like to see Watson make some kind of donation towards a women's shelter or crisis center. And they would also like to hear from owner Dee Haslam. Obviously, she's in the front office, and they want Russ a woman's perspective from the front office. And they're saying that would go a long way.
Of course, she's a co-owner of the team.
There you go.
All right, Lydia, thank you so much.
We start tonight with big news surrounding Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson. A big settlement today. 20 of the 24 sexual misconduct lawsuits filed against Watson have been settled. Tony Busby, who's representing the women, said that the terms and amounts of settlements are confidential.
We have team coverage on the settlements for you tonight. Sports director Jimmy Donovan has the X's and O's on what happened and what's next for Watson's career. And Neil Fisher is live outside First Energy Stadium with what fans are saying. We also have 2 attorneys who will be joining us to give their perspective on what happened today.
But we begin our coverage with the voice of the Browns, Jim Donovan. Jimmy, until today, Watson was very adamant he was not going to settle. And really, on the other side, so was Busby, the attorney representing the women. He was dug in, saying that he was going to take all of these cases to court. So what happened?
Well, a lot has happened in a week's time. It was really 1 week ago at Brown's mandatory minicamp that Deshaun Watson held a press conference and reiterated the fact that he's innocent and he wanted to clear his name. And if that meant going to trial in the civil suits, he was fully willing to go all the way with that. So with settlement not being in his vocabulary, a total change today, he settled.
A major about-face for Deshaun Watson today. 20 of the civil lawsuits against him have been settled. 4 cases are still unresolved, but there's wide-scale belief that negotiations continue to resolve those too. This after a week ago when Watson again professed his innocence. But in that press conference last Tuesday in Berea, there was a sign that Watson realized this wasn't going away, and it was affecting too many people. It might be time to take action.
I do have regrets as far as the impact that it's had on the community and people outside of just myself. And that includes my family, that includes this organization, that includes my teammates in this locker room that have to answer to these questions. That includes, the fan base of the Cleveland Browns. That includes males, females, everyone across the world, So that's one thing I do regret.
It's interesting that the move to settle comes as we await the NFL's disciplinary ruling on a probable suspension. It also comes on the heels of a Washington Post story late last week stating that the NFL was seeking a substantial suspension of Watson. But now there are settlements. Yet the NFL was quick to point out this afternoon the settlements will have no bearing on their decision. This story truly turned sideways on Deshaun Watson when the HBO show Real Sports featured the case. Finally, there were faces and voices attached to the Houston women involved. There were also alarming details of what allegedly went on.
This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I thought the session was going to be.
We are still a long way away from Deshaun Watson playing in a Browns regular season game, but today was a big step. And according to Watson's attorney, Rusty Hardin, this will end the way all civil cases do.
Money, money, and money.
Amen to that. That's the way it is going to end. On the civil side, we are now waiting on the NFL side. That's going to be very interesting. It's hard for me to believe that right now, as this played out today, that the settlements are not going to be recognized by the NFL as sort of a way to maybe bridge the gap between the NFL in a substantial suspension and what Watson wants, a little lighter sentence on the number of games that he will miss. Jay, also remember this, that the NFL Players Association is at the ready with an appeal. If Watson is suspended, they're going to defend him, and they're going to use NFL owners' behavior and throw that right back at the league. They are talking about Robert Kraft. They're talking about Daniel Snyder in Washington, Jerry Richardson, the former owner of the Carolina Panthers, all involved in sexual misconduct with little to no punishment.
Yeah, and I know part of that would mean that those investigations that are to now private might become public, and I know that's the last thing the NFL wants. Quickly before I let you go, you had said, I think last week, maybe the week before, that you expected to hear something by July 1st. Is that still the case? Are the Browns expecting to hear punishment from the league by then?
I think they are. I think they've realized it definitely before July 4th, maybe right at the beginning of July, maybe that Friday at the beginning of July. That's when they kind of look for news like that to be kind of dumped out there and let it subside all weekend long. That's what they're looking for. And really, by that time, Jay, when that decision is made by the NFL, these other 4 cases that are still pending, we could have settlements in those.
All right. Jimmy Donovan, thanks. We'll have more at 6. One other final quick note on this. The Associated Press is reporting that according to an unnamed league source, quote, settling doesn't give someone a pass, and this person indicated a lengthy suspension remains in order. So we'll see. Bets?
With the Watson story, Neil Fisher spoke with several people in Cleveland today, right after the news broke. Some say Watson should play right away, while others want more clarity before he snaps the ball.
Tonight, public reaction to the Deshaun Watson settlement news. Some see this as the end. Others are on the fence of how to feel.
It's definitely a moral dilemma, because you could look at it either way, is that it's not a conviction, so you can't hold him guilty, or you can look at it as just because he settled doesn't mean it's not true.
The settlement raising questions with limited answers.
If it was something really wrong with it, they'd be going all the way through with it. If they feel like it wasn't that wrong, that money can settle it, then let money settle it.
Most people we approached in Cleveland didn't want to comment, but others were transparent and believe Watson should be taking the snaps in the fall.
I think he should play. That's his career. I don't want anyone to lose their career if he was not found guilty.
While some don't want Watson to lose his career, others are looking for more clarity.
I think everything should get figured out and brought to light. It's not right to just settle it, in my opinion.
The main question after this settlement, will this lead to Deshaun Watson being on the field faster?
I mean, based off the history of the NFL, he'd be on the field. The question is, how long did it take him to get on the field? Would it be like 8 games? Would they come hard on him, try to do the whole season, 12 games? Or would it be just 4, kind of like Ben Roethlisberger some years back? So, I mean, I guess that's the question now since they settled.
That is the question now. And another question would be, since he hasn't been found guilty, if Watson hits the field and Watson wins, would you root for him? One thing fan bases love is winning. And will those wins that Watson has under his belt belittle these accusations. Laura.
So many questions.
Deshaun Watson, Ephraim settles with 20 of the 24 women who are suing him civilly. 4 of them, of course, didn't accept the settlement. But here's what I want to ask you. Now, the league has said that this will play no role in what their suspension is for him. I do feel like this has obviously gotten ugly in the court of public opinion, right? Whether he's, they rule him guilty or not, it's just a bad look. I think whatever the suspension is, I think it has to be something where the public feels like he's paying a price. And so when he comes back, whatever that suspension, I'm just going to tell you what I think. I think a season. And now if he's just proven innocent and it looks like he was unfortunately the victim of just a huge, scheme to get him, then obviously I don't want a year suspension. Barring that, I think a year, because I think fans would be like, when he comes back after a season off, really 2, I think people will be like, okay, he paid the price. He will have had time to rehabilitate himself publicly, whether it's just doing good deeds or talk, whatever it might be. But I think it has to be something where people are like, okay, he paid the price, so they can feel better about cheering for him. But that's my take. What is yours?
Now, in terms of being found guilty, he's not being tried in the court of law. It's a civil suit. So there is no admission of guilt in a civil suit. Right. So you got to take that part off the table, because the grand jury twice didn't feel it was enough to indict him and bring up criminal charges. So now you're right when you're talking about he's being tried in the court of public opinion, because that's a civil suit. There'll be a monetary award, levied if he's found to be responsible for whatever that. Not an admission of guilt, though. Right. So responsible. I don't know if the NFL can fine him or suspend him based on that, because it's already said that he won't face criminal charges. Well, but they don't need criminal charges, and they don't need that. But with now, if this was a case that the outcome could have been like jail or whatever that is. Now that's a whole different set of parameters, and in that aspect, you would definitely wait for the courts to do their thing before you even did anything. But the NFL is in a position to where they can address a situation that's been looming for almost 2 years now, to where they can come out today. They can come out tomorrow and say, hey, Deshaun Watson, based on the information we've gathered, is going to be gone for 10 games, 8 games, 7 games, 14 games or a year. Right? If they do, like you said, if they do a year, that should, and I don't want to say satisfy people, but it's a hard stance the NFL is taking. Right. Because that'll be 2 years that this young man hasn't been able to play while dealing with his off-the-field issues, which we're like, okay, well, it happens. When Michael Vick got, sent to prison for 18 months, I believe it was, when he came out, people were like, okay, he paid he got a second chance. He got a second chance. And so in that aspect, the NFL's in a situation where they don't want to make the same mistake they did with the Ray Rice situation. Right. And subsequently, since the Ray Rice situation, it's been, they're not rushing in to punish or do anything before they feel they have all the information and all the facts. And I think they also, Ephraim, weigh the court of public opinion. Oh, yeah. Well, you have to. Yeah. They take into consideration what the temperature of the public is regarding this player. So what do you think? I've said, and again, if something changes with the way it looks, you're right. There won't be any admission of guilt. But if it comes out in the civil court, you know what? There's just not the story looks differently. It starts to favor him more so than the women, which I would argue it favors the women right now. Mm-hmm. Then I think if that's the case, I wouldn't feel good about a year suspension. But right now, from what I see, I feel like a year is appropriate. And I feel like you said, that would appease the public who feels like, man, this guy's got to pay some type of price for what he did to these women.
What do you think would be fair?
And you got to,
with what we know now, I know we don't know
what we know now, I think a year suspension would be fair. Because no matter what, something is going on. He, 66 massages in 18 months or whatever it is.
Masseuses.
Not massage, masseuses.
That's a big difference, right?
Like there's something there. Inappropriate behavior, there's something there, obviously. Whether it rises to the level of a criminal act, that it was deemed that wasn't the case for whatever reason.
Right.
But you don't have to commit a crime to be out of pocket. You get what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to commit a crime to be out of pocket.
Right.
Like, you can do some things. You come on, bro. You tripping. You tripping, right? There's a lot of you trippings out there, right? And I think this is a situation where he was tripping, like flat out. He was tripping. No matter what all it takes is one, right? You can have 65 masseuse be okay with, how you
whatever you want to do,
right? And then one like, nah, that's not me. You know what I mean? So all it takes is one. So to have this high a number of young women who are coming out and said they felt uncomfortable or they were put in situations that weren't conducive to what they were trying to do in terms of their career and their job, then there's a problem there. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So he needs to do some soul search. He needs to get himself together.
Well, look, at best, from what we know, Ephraim, at best, it looks like he was using this massage situation to meet women.
Yeah, the freaky dicky.
And there was something there, right? It was something within him that was into that type of, I don't want to say role playing, but that type of situation. Because obviously, you know this better than me. Good looking guy, NFL star, wealthy. Come on, he doesn't need to go through this to meet women.
No, you don't. But maybe that's his nightclub. Maybe that's his.
It was his.
Maybe that's his.
That's at best, though.
Yeah, that's at best.
At worst, he was doing what was alleged of him. So we will see, but we both feel like a year is appropriate. Yes. And those are the reports that's what the league will push for. So we'll see if that comes to pass. And Ephraim, we were just talking about
too much bad blood that's between the two of them. That they just should go ahead and part ways. Baker wants to start anew. Cleveland wants to start anew. They've got Jacoby Brissett. They brought in Joshua Dobbs. I just think, Skip, I don't know how you repair this. Even for a year, they say, you know what, Baker, let's make, Baker's like, make what right? Y'all didn't try to make it right before. Now you need me. No, let me go my separate ways. Y'all got to pay me $19 million. Just let me go and be out your guys' hair because I want you guys out of my hair.
Okay, that all sounds good, except that it's not Baker's call. He can have all the bad blood he wants. But I'm going to remind you, once upon a time, not too long ago, after Deshaun spurned Cleveland on the first go-around, it was widely reported out of Cleveland that the Browns were completely content to go forward with a hopefully healthy Baker Mayfield this coming season.
Right. They did. But we're going to switch gears a little bit and go to the NFL, where it's not official, but there's a report from in the Washington Post, Rob, that says they believe that the league is going to push for a 1-year suspension of Deshaun Watson. It's Mark Mask of the Washington Post. He reports that the NFL, that the NFL will argue that Watson should receive a quote-unquote significant suspension and that the league, quote-unquote, probably will ask for a 1-year banishment. I say ask because it's got to run through the federal judge, retired federal judge Sue Robinson. But that's what they're saying the league is probably going to ask for, Rob, a full year. And they go on in the story, they're hoping for a full year. So it says if the league thinks that the judge will go, like whatever they recommend, that she'll go lesser. So if they recommend a year, she'll cut it to 8 games or 10 games or 6 games or whatever. then they might go even longer than a year, suspecting she'll cut it, and then they'll get the year that they want. So we'll see. But Rob, you and I have been saying for weeks that it seems like it just seems like everything's pointing to him not being able to play this season. And at least according to this report, that's what the league would like to see as well.
Because there has been no closure to it, and all we keep getting is more details and more accusations. That's why we think that it's turning that way. It feels like that, doesn't it? It feels like it's going to be a year, like he's not going to play because of stuff still coming out, and it's just, what a mess. But then again, we saw the mess with Trevor Bauer, Chris. Baseball couldn't make a decision on him, and when they came with the decision, they came heavy-handed. I mean,
absolutely.
He got 2 years. That guy was the highest-paid player in baseball last year, and didn't get to play. He got all of his money, Chris, but they put a 2-year ban on Trevor Bauer. I know he's trying to still, push back and have an appeal. I just don't know where that's going to go. And I get this here in the NFL. Whether or not they ask for 2 years, Chris, so the judge gives 1. Is that what they're trying to do? You know what I mean?
Like, you ask for 2, they might give a year and a half. Then you're like, that's a little too much. But I look.
A year and a half, maybe, and then gets a year?
Rob, I got to be honest. I feel like, and we'll see if there are any judgments or whatever, more truth comes out. But it feels like this is why I kind of think it should be, if he's guilty, I think it should be like a year. And I think, Rob, that it's getting so ugly. It's getting kind of, it's just leaving a bad taste in your mouth. And I think that fans the NFL has to look at it this way, Rob. We have to do something where fans will feel like he paid the price. If he's guilty, fans will feel like he paid the price. And if he comes back after 6 games or 8 games, a lot of fans aren't going to feel that way. It's still going to be kind of a yucky taste in their mouth, if you will, when he's out there playing.
Right.
If you give him a year, it's like, okay, he served his time. Obviously, they will do some PR, I assume, him and his people, to kind of rehabilitate his image to the degree that they can.
Right.
And, he'll come back in a year and people will be like, okay, look, we ain't like what he did, but he paid the price.
Chances in life. I mean, let's not be. People have gotten second chances and made good on them, and some people have botched them, but some people have made good on a second chance. So I'm not against second chances, but there has to be some sort of punishment. And
Do
remember,
you agree though? It has to be enough to make people feel like, okay,
yeah, because of what you're talking about. Like because of it, and Chris, just the pure numbers and the actions and the details that we've heard, right? I mean, none of them are pretty. I mean, the details are bad. You're talking about 66 women at last count. This guy was a pillar in the community. He was somebody that people respected. And then you go, well, what was he doing after hours? Like, is this who he is? Is he really this guy? Is he a predator? Like what? Like, those are the things that people have to be able to get over,
right?
And I don't think
thoughts. Like every time they see him, you don't want people thinking that.
No, you don't. And so I think that there has to be some sort of real punishment, and the league is going to. We've been talking about it. I just think a year will give him time to think about what went down. Have other people say, okay, he's got his punishment. And then I think people can reconcile, Chris, and say, and start the healing process and say, okay, if he's, contrite about it and just fesses up and owns. I want to hear him talk about
if he did it.
Right.
Because I'll say this,
but
Rob,
I do want to hear him say, I made some mistakes. Like own it. If it's true. I understand.
If it's true.
Right.
Reaction nationally to
settlements of 20 of the 24 lawsuits kind of goes all over the spectrum. Let's take a listen to Jonathan Jones, CBS Sports' new football insider, NFL insider. Here's what he had to say about the settlements.
It certainly seems, Jeremy, like the path to a punishment from the NFL becomes much clearer here. And I had been told early last week that a punishment from the NFL of Deshaun Watson could very well happen at the end of the month. But of course, that was couched in a number of caveats like if more comes out, if more cases are filed. And now it certainly seems that things are beginning to wind down. So what we have here, and I reached out to attorney Tony Busby earlier this afternoon, had some follow-up questions. He declined to answer those follow-up questions like, am I to assume that that means that 20 cases have been settled? He said that the statement was enough, and so went to the Harris County website where these lawsuits have been filed over the past year plus. And there have been no recent ones filed, so we should still remain at 24. Simple math means that 20 cases have been settled, and that 4 remain active, including the first one, Ashley Solis, who also was on HBO Real Sports, among many other places, telling her story. And so we should be close to a resolution from the NFL as it relates to Deshaun Watson, what that punishment is going to be. I've heard significant. What that means, Jeremy, is unclear, whether that's 8, 10, 12, 17 games. I am not willing to venture into guessing what that would be.
You can be sure that the NFL told Deshaun Watson and his camp that they need to get this taken care of so that the league can move on. The league needs to move on and work through this.
Former Clemson quarterback Deshaun Watson reaching an agreement to settle 20 of the 24 civil lawsuits filed against him by women who accuse him of sexual assault and harassment. Watson has been accused by massage therapists of harassing, assaulting, or touching them during appointments when he was playing for the Houston Texans. The first 22 lawsuits were filed in March and April of last year. The last 2 have since been filed since HBO's Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel aired an interview last month with 2 of the women who detailed their encounters with Watson. The lawyer for the women says he plans on taking the 4 lawsuits that were not settled to trial. Back in March, Watson was traded to the Cleveland Browns. His attorney has not given a comment on the situation.
I raced back from Pittsburgh from my annual physical once I saw that the Deshaun Watson cases had settled. Not all of them, but most of them. 4 of the cases are not settled. 20 of the lawsuits are in the process of being resolved. It's not official yet, but once the deal is done between the lawyers, it very rarely falls apart. Once one of the lawyers puts out a public statement that the cases are resolved, rarely, it's not impossible, but rarely does that tentative deal become anything other than a final deal. So what does it mean? As a practical matter, it means 20 of the cases will now be gone. 4 will be left. 4 will move forward unless they're also settled. Once the defendant starts paying out money to settle cases, it makes it easier for the defendant to keep paying money. So maybe these other 4 believe that for them, justice is going to have a higher price tag than it has for the other 20. And maybe at some point they reach an agreement and the other 4 cases are also gone. I won't be surprised if we get to a point where the other 4 cases are gone. I got a couple of possibilities of how that can happen that I'll talk about in a minute. For now, the thing to remember is that there have been multiple opportunities for these cases to settle before the first case was ever even filed. Should have settled then. When Tony Busby contacted Athletes First, the firm that handles Deshaun Watson's football interests and also provided some initial legal services, seeking $100,000 in settlement. If they had just merely engaged him in a back and forth, they could have settled her case, and maybe there never would have been a case number 2 or 3 or 4 or so on. Instead, they refused to put anything on the table. They pissed off Tony Busby, and the next thing you know, there's more than 20 cases. So, yeah, in hindsight, if an opening demand is $100,000, chances are you could settle between 50 and 75. He should have done it. And as we said on PFT Live recently, cases like that get settled all the time and we never know about it. because they never get filed, they never become a thing. That's the value in writing the check and cutting off a claim before it becomes a full-blown legal ordeal. Some people want to call that extortion. It is not. It's only extortion if you really don't intend to follow through with it, or if you say something like, and I'm trying to think of an example here. I should have thought of one in advance, but basically you want money. Otherwise, you're going to do something that, is unrelated to pursuing your rights in court. They have every right to go to court to try to get justice for what they experienced. Pre-litigation settlement talks are not extortion. They're pre-litigation settlement talks. If you intend to go through with it, and if you do go through with it, if you don't settle the case, it's not extortion. It can never be extortion. And in many cases, the potential defendant is far better off writing the check, avoiding the legal fees, avoiding the publicity, and avoiding a settlement that ends up likely being much higher than what could have been reached at the time it all first came up. Then, after the 22 cases were filed, remember this phase 2 of potential settlement. The plaintiffs, led by attorney Tony Busby, wanted all of the payments to be confidential. Deshaun Watson and Rusty Hardin wanted no confidentiality provision. They basically wanted to do a victory lap. They wanted to dunk on Tony Busby and say, look how little he got. Look how small the amount was, which means Deshaun Watson didn't do anything. This was just a nuisance settlement. That's what they call it. It's a nuisance. We're making a nuisance go away. It's a minuscule amount of money relative to what we would spend on legal fees. It's a no-brainer. So he didn't do anything wrong. Well,
he didn't play, but he got paid. This is going to be without pay. And Cleveland expected this because they structured his contract.
They did.
So the line he ain't really got no money this year. He's making $1 million base. The guys get $230 guarantee and $1 million of it is for this year. So they kind of suspected this. Kind of like when Tom Brady missed those first 4 games, he had a minimum salary, so you only going to take $200,000+ versus what he was going to schedule to make that season. This is a very similar situation, Skip. And I think the NFL is going to say, yeah, he did miss the entire 2021 season.
Yep.
But he did receive his compensation.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be for a year with no compensation.
Yep. Yeah, it's almost like Cleveland validated where the NFL was going before it went there, right?
Yeah,
because they said, well, we just won't pay him much.
Right.
Okay. I would like to applaud Mike Jones of USA Today. He's been at this for a long time, and he did by far the best reporting on this topic as it broke yesterday that 20 of 24 had settled.
Right.
And up high, he got the comment from the league saying today's development has no impact on the collectively bargained disciplinary process. So the NFL is saying we're just going straight on. We're nothing has changed.
Is innocence, and let's put it out there right now. Just because you settle a lawsuit does not mean you are guilty or innocent. In a way, it says you just want the case to go away. Who knows more about this type of situation than our guest we're bringing in now, Jared Klebenow. He is an attorney here in the Cleveland area. He has handled several civil lawsuits, both from the plaintiff and the defendant side of things. Jared, how are you today?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
Thanks for joining us. You have been a contributor with us all along the way, not just on this case, but several others. When you heard the news today that Deshaun Watson, and we'll wait to get to the 20 versus 24 thing, but when you heard the news that he settled any of these cases, what was your reaction?
Well, I was a bit surprised. Like you had said, it kind of came out of nowhere. You know, all along, he had held that he wanted to get the story out there and clear his name and fight the fight. Now, from a legal standpoint, it's not surprising at all that they've settled these cases. You know, large majority of lawsuits resolve via settlement. And in a huge, huge public case like this, it's not a surprise that him and his attorney want this to go away for obvious reasons. Besides the fact that the NFL is investigating him, from a public relations standpoint alone, I think he's looking to put this behind him.
Now let's get into the fact that 20 out of 24 have taken the settlement. Give us some inside baseball here. When you have 20 out of 24 that accept the settlement, Is the idea that there was an offer put on the table for X amount of money, we need to drop this case, this is what you'll be given. Is it the same for probably all 20 of those, yes or no?
Yeah, so it depends. It can certainly vary. So what could have happened is there might be a large pool of money that's going to be divided amongst a number of plaintiffs, and they may have either been able to opt in or opt out. And it sounds like 20 of them have opted in. It would be a bit surprising if there was individual settlements for each case. More likely, although not for sure, it was a large sum of money that was given, and it's up to the plaintiffs and the plaintiff's attorney to divide that money in a way that satisfies the plaintiffs. As to the other 4, it could be a number of things. One could be they simply decided they're not doing this for the money. They want this story to be told. They don't want to sign confidentiality agreements, which will likely be required, and they want to try the case. On the other side, it may be they feel they have a stronger case than the pot of money which was allotted to them, and they want to pursue the claim to see if there may be more financial windfall moving forward.
Is this normal to have sort of this split, the 20 on one side of the room and the 4 on the other side of the room?
Yeah, it's not uncommon. It is certainly, when you have an offer that's made where a group of plaintiffs want to accept and some don't, you're in this position where, a group may say, look, we want to take it, where a few outliers say they don't. So the attorney likely met with them and said, okay, we'll set this up for the group that wants to. We'll figure out a way to divide the money that's been offered and accepted in a way which all the plaintiffs agree to. And for the remaining plaintiffs, it sounds like he will remain on as counsel and continue to pursue their claims. And again, it doesn't mean that just because these 20 have settled and the 4 haven't, that the other 4
the number of cases that have joined, I was reading where that would not impact the investigation itself on what would be the recommended suspension length. And this was last week. But the settlements, unless you're just under the guise that it doesn't matter if he settled or not, it was going to be this suspension the entire time, I don't know how the settlements wouldn't factor into that process.
Yeah, they're just saying, to my knowledge, they're trying to tell us that it took us this long to get the information we needed. We have all the information needed. The fact that he's settling and getting out of any further liability with these 20 people has nothing to do with it, because we have all the info we need on it, whether that's a big-time suspension or a 2-game suspension, which we don't know yet. They're saying we have all the info regardless.
I think it would affect the timetable, which I'm not convinced is written in stone yet. And I don't know. I think when we hear what the investigation concluded, if we hear what the investigation concluded, then we'll know if this was BS or not. And I don't know how much we're going to hear about what the investigation concluded, though I think we should. I don't know that we need it in sordid detail, but we need some conclusion, some conclusive, the conclusion of the report, if not the content of the report.
Oh, there are going to be a ton of questions with this.
Yeah.
Are
they going to answer them, though? Or are they going to, go more like they've gone with the recent investigations of ownership? Did they get a verbal report?
They will be far more transparent with this.
They're going to be very transparent with the player. Again, if you're looking for
not
fairness,
that they shouldn't be with ownership.
Right.
They should be with all of it.
Right. I agree. They should be more transparent with ownership. But I mean, people that are pushing for some sort of equality when it comes to how owners and players are treated, keep hoping and wishing and dreaming and seeing if your pockets fill up doing that, because that ain't going to happen. Well, they're always going to be treated differently because they are the bosses. They are Goodell's boss.
Here's why
they will be treated differently.
Here's why I think they may not be so transparent. I'm not convinced they got that much information.
Well,
because the grand jury stuff's behind closed doors and sealed, and there hasn't been that much outside of closed doors. And if these women aren't speaking that much to investigators or whatever, then what compels them to? What compels them to speak to the NFL?
Well, they spoke to the NFL.
11 did, and how much did they say? We don't know.
Remember the Real Sports deal where they were saying, I felt like I was, they wanted to answer more questions. They felt like the NFL was okay, open and shut type deal, right. Asked some very strange questions, didn't really feel like they cared one way or the other about it. They were just kind of going through the motions, was what the women that spoke with the NFL came back with.
So they'll look back.
I think there's plenty. If you want to understand the allegations made against Deshaun Watson. There's all sorts of material out there where you can read everything about what's being alleged. So getting information on what these women are claiming is not difficult. Now, their discussion with Deshaun Watson, how forthcoming he is based on his attorneys being, I don't know with all that, but I don't think there's any shortage of info on what the women are claiming.
But new information. I'm looking for what did they uncover as new information. The reason they're investigating it is to uncover and unearth more information than is out there. And when they don't have more information than is out there, they're going to look foolish. I'm not going to be surprised because they continue to think that they are the FBI or the CIA or Texas law enforcement, which they are not.